So, excited to be able to be here with all of you this morning and to get to press in. We have been, over the last number of weeks, reading through the book of Nehemiah and learning a bit about what was happening in an ancient time as a leader. Nehemiah was used by God to actually be able to rebuild the city of Jerusalem. Jerusalem had been a conquered city. A number of different empires had come through and basically decimated the place. They had exiled the people, and so the city was a ruin. And Nehemiah, through inspiration and through some unique positioning, was able to make a plea to the Persian king, and the Persian king sent him with opportunity, with resources to be able to begin rebuilding the city. And this is what I want to be able to say. Today, I have some good news for you. I think we're literally 6 weeks into this now, and I want to be able to tell you that today we get to read the passage where we actually hear that the wall is finished, right? So, yeah, a little bit of applause. When we get to that point in reading it, if you could actually celebrate, that would be really, really great, okay? Just some whoops, right? And some excitement. Because all the way up till now, what we've been reading about is the fact that Nehemiah had great obstacles to overcome. He had enemies that he kept encountering. There were difficulties within the community of people. And so again and again, Nehemiah seeks to build this wall. But the crazy thing that we might not realize as we're reading through the first 6 chapters is that the overall timeline is only 52 days. So everything that we've been reading up to now is happening very, very rapidly. 52 days ago from here right now was April 23rd. Now, April 22nd is my son's birthday, right? And so I can kind of picture back where we were on April 23rd because I know that we were celebrating that little guy. We were making sure that we, had a fun birthday event for him. And all I have to do is kind of think in my mind, wow, April, like a last week of that, then through May, June, here we are, just 52 days later. That's the time span that it took Nehemiah to be able to do these steps. So in first 1 to 10 days, and these are generalities, but the idea was that there was preparation. He actually scans the walls, goes out at night and makes an assessment of where things are really busted. And then he mobilizes the people. He says, hey, will you join me? And they say, yes, let's do this good work. Then they get after it. And there's rapid progress. It says that the people's hearts were in it. So I don't know if you've ever started a job with a team of people. Maybe you had to go out to a location. And there's times where, as a leader, you're like, let's do it. And everybody's like, okay, all right. That's not what this was like. This was the team saying, let's do this. This is important. We believe in it. And there was rapid progress all around this large city. Think about trying to build a wall just around this school property, which was significantly smaller than what Jerusalem would have been. Imagine that we said to each other, hey, we're going to try and build a wall all the way around this Hillview property. How long would that take us? How discouraged would you be when you started off and all of a sudden within that progress, what ends up happening is that there are threats, there's mockery, there are enemies that are nearby that begin to say things that are meant to intimidate. They say, you're never going to finish. Man, what are you building that wall out of? Like sticks and stones? Better look out. If one of the foxes comes by and jumps on it, it's going to topple over. Right? What are those kids blocks that you're using, right? It's all meant to cause the people to feel discouraged. And then within that, there also comes a point where there is a threat of violence. There are enemy nations close by that do not want this city to be restored. And so they decide that they will come together in a little bit of a coalition and that they will attack. And so there is a need for armed defense where every person that is on the wall prays, God protect us, and has a sword at their hand. I just will say this, I don't wield a sword all that often, right? But I can only imagine that as I'm trying to move large stones and create mortar and put this wall up, that the obstacle of having a sword either at my side or in my hand is very, very difficult. And yet that's how they proceeded forward. Eventually, there are some internal crises that come up. Nehemiah is the leader of this kind of band of people that are in the city of Jerusalem, and he finds out that there's actually a lot of injustice going on. This is what we talked about last week. The nobles and officials are actually taking advantage of the people within the city. They are not exactly looting them, but they are leveraging all sorts of different things of taxes or of high interest rates. So much so that some of the people cry out, and when they cry out, they say, we have some of our children who are now enslaved to our very own people, which is just a sad, sad state. And Nehemiah is angry about this. And he comes up and says, like, this is wrong, what we're doing. This is an injustice. And he calls the officials out for this and the people who were rich or were in good standing. He says, you need to give back their land. You need to return their people. You need to return some of the interest. This is not okay. These are the community of the people of God. We're supposed to be a family. We've got enemies out there. Why? What are you doing? Why are you causing problems internally? Focus on the outward problems. But he actually takes time to address what's going on there. But then, as we're going to get into chapter 6, the enemies don't stop. It's not like, wait, are you guys having difficulties inside the walls? We'll give you a break. No. As they near completion of the wall, the threat actually goes up. Because enemies, when they see vulnerability or when they see that you might actually complete what God has called you to do, they ramp up their intensity because they are even more threatened by what you are potentially going to see accomplished. And so they this time they change their tactic, and that's what we're going to talk about today, is how enemies go from at first just open intimidation and mockery and then threat of violence. And when they realize that that can't work, then they move to subterfuge. They move to these other ways to kind of undermine the work. And we're going to get to the point where we, get to hear about the installing of the final gates and the finishing of the wall and what that actually meant for the people. So that's where we're at. We're going to be going into Nehemiah chapter 6. I would invite you to take out a Bible, or if you have a phone, to be able to just look at that. Nehemiah chapter 6. We're going to read through a good section of verses. We'll stop, we'll talk for a little while, and then we'll continue on. So pray with me really briefly. Dear God, as we read through your scripture today, we know this story happened a long time ago. And yet we know that these kind of enemies still exist today for your purposes. They are enemies who at times attack us. And so God, help us to learn and also to hear from you what we need to know in order to continue to live in this world as your people. We love you, God. We pray this in your name. Amen. Nehemiah chapter 6, verse 1 says this: When word came to Sanballat, Tobiah, and Geshem the Arab, and the rest of our enemies, that I had rebuilt the wall, and not a gap was left in it, though up to that time I had not set the doors in the gates, Sanballat and Geshem sent me this message: Come, let us meet together in one of the villages on the plain of Ono. But they were scheming to harm me. So I sent messengers to them with this reply: I'm carrying on a great project and cannot go down. Why should the work stop while I leave it and go down to you? 4 times they sent me the same message, and each time I gave them the same answer. Then the 5th time Sanballat sent his aide to me with the same message, and in his hand was an unsealed letter in which was written, It is reported among the nations. And Geshem says it is true, that you and the Jews are plotting to revolt, and therefore you are building the wall. Moreover, according to these reports, you are about to become their king, and have even appointed prophets to make this proclamation about you in Jerusalem: There is a king in Judah. Now this report will get back to the king, and by that they mean the king of Persia. So come, let us meet together. I sent him this reply: Nothing like what you are saying is happening. You are just making it up out of your head. They were all trying to frighten us, thinking their hands will get too weak for the work and it will not be completed. But I prayed, now strengthen my hands. I want to just draw your attention to a couple things within that scripture section. The first is that I want to show you a picture of the plains of Ono. Okay? Might not look exactly like this, but the plains of Ono is an area just outside of the area of Judah. We can actually show you a map really briefly. It was an area that was close to the Mediterranean. It was very, very strategic because the different neighboring nations often used it either as a point of coming together for treaty or a place where you would have to contend. So this would be a place of battle if you were going to seek to be able to conquer different parts, because along the Mediterranean, it was open. It gave like an open area for a conflict. Now, if you can see within the kind of gray area there, that was the area that was really given to Judah. So this is what Persia was allowing them to have back. But the center peg of it is Jerusalem, because Jerusalem would be considered a fortified city. It was a place where people could run to if they needed protection. Now, the travel from Jerusalem to Ono was about between 25 to 35 miles, which would be a day's travel. So think about this. If someone said to you, hey, why don't you just come out to Palm Springs? Hey, you know what? We need to meet. Something's going on. Why don't you just drive down to San Diego? Come, meet with us. Take a day off. Forget the work that you're doing right now and come. You know what? We've got a nice spot out in the plains. We got a nice spot in Palm Springs. We can eat. We can sit at the table. We've got to talk. There's some things that we've got to be able to work through. So come on down. We can go. Maybe, we'll sit in a nice restaurant along the ocean front. Just come. You understand some of the temptation there. Some of the pull is, hey, step away from all the noise and the difficulty and the challenge of what you're going, and hey, you actually need to come and talk to us, because we're these other powers that at this point in time, look, they are completely surrounded. And it's not just Sanballat, who is from Samaria, but it is these other nations that all have a coalition. They're in cahoots, right, against Judah. And so they're saying, hey, it's time for us to have some conversations. And at first, maybe the way that they're pitching it is, hey, come on out to this neutral ground and we'll be able to have a conversation on the plains of Ono. And I want to be able to clarify for you, there's a really interesting phrase. And if there's every time when you're reading through the Bible and you come across something that you think, like, wait, why are they mentioning, why are they intentional about the fact that the letter was unsealed? I would just tell you, go ahead and just Google that, right? Just take a look and say, like, wait, that caught my attention. I want you to know that there's a reason why they put that in there, that it is an unsealed letter. Whenever officials were actually communicating with one another, they would put a clay seal on it so that the communication was known to be direct between me and between this other individual, right? But an unsealed letter meant that it was open to be read and even proclaimed or shared with anybody along the way who happened to hear it. And so this unsealed letter was public. The accusations that we read about here were not just between Sanballat and Nehemiah. They were public. This was a post. This was a news story. And whenever someone official was actually, like their own aide, was carrying a message, as they would go, it's possible that they would actually have proclaimed it in each of the different cities as they traveled through. I am headed to Jerusalem, and Sanballat wants it to be known that these are the things. And we know because of the way that he says it is reported among the nations. Guess who was doing the reporting? Sanballat. This guy. He's pushing the message out there. He's the one spreading the rumor. And yet, if you've ever had an enemy, if you've ever had somebody who ultimately is not for you, you know how dangerous this kind of thing is, because this is what gossip and rumor and just, whispers, this is what it is. It brings into question who you are. It brings you into a spot where now you have to suddenly defend yourself. So come on out to the plains of Ono. Come and talk with us. Hey, I'm on your side. I want you to know that these things are being reported, so come and meet with us so that we can get to the bottom, so we can get some clarity on this. But all of it really is an assassination attempt. Come out from behind those walls, come away from the purpose that God has called you to, and come see what we have for you. It's a trap. It's a way to ultimately kill Nehemiah or potentially to distract him long enough that they could attack the city. Because when Nehemiah's not there, they're open and vulnerable in a way that they aren't normally. So do you feel the slime on this? I just think about that letter and I literally picture it just dripping with like this gross, gnarly darkness. Because this guy, Sanballat, is being used by evil to be able to potentially stop God's work. It's bad. And what I want you to know is that the enemy tactics up till this point they've had a lot of different things that they've done. There's been mockery and intimidation. So sometimes it's just a jest and starts off as a joke, but eventually it moves into a point of actual like hurtful things. There's a threat of violence and actually an army being raised up. There's distraction, which is happening again and again and again. There is now an assassination plot. On top of that, there's defamation or like kind of a smear campaign. You're bad news, Nehemiah. All this leadership, he's putting his heart and soul into trying to see this wall be rebuilt. And as he's doing so, do you know what's happening? His leadership is being called into question. I know why you're working so hard, Nehemiah. It's for yourself. Oh, and the king's going to find out about it. In fact, we've already sent some messages to the king because we know that you're talking to the prophets and you're going to stir up your own kind of way. And then what we're going to read about here in just a second is what it looks like when there is betrayal, when someone on the very inside moves against someone. This is maybe some of the most painful part. So pick up with me in verse 10, 6 verse 10. One day I went to the house of Shemaiah, son of Delaiah, the son of Mehetabel, who was shut in at his home. He said, "Let us meet in the house of God inside the temple, and let us close the temple doors, because men are coming to kill you. By night, this night, they are coming to kill you." But I said, "Should a man like me run away? Or should someone like me go into the temple to save his life? I will not go." I realized that God had not sent him, but that he had prophesied against me because Tobiah and Sanballat had hired him. He had been hired to intimidate me so that I would commit a sin by doing this, and then they would give me a bad name to discredit me. So think about this. Maybe it doesn't occur to us when we first give that a reading, but this promise of safety within the temple, for somebody who isn't aware of the kind of the sacredness of the temple, you have to realize that it was a place where only priests were allowed to go. But when he says shut the doors, he's not talking about the outer courtyard of the temple. He's saying, no, go into the place where God is, right? And I shouldn't give, quotes like that, right? Because God did dwell within his temple for his people. But go there and you'll be safe. But what he's trying to do is get a public official to move into a place that was reserved for priests. And in doing so, they get to say, look at this scaredy cat, right? They would have cameras rolling as Nehemiah snuck in, and they would immediately put out the word, live tweet, right? Hey, oh no, we just want you to know that Nehemiah just scampered back into the temple, and number one, he's not supposed to be there, and number two, looks like he's afraid, They were going to smear him. And I am so grateful that we have a God who understands the enemy's tactics, and who on multiple occasions here, it's not overt, but he gives Nehemiah insight. And Nehemiah ultimately responds, not with fear. There's so much for him to be afraid of. There's so many reasons for him to give in to fear in these situations. And yet he looks back at this, this twisted, tricking individual, and he says, should a man like me run away? That's not what I do. Should I go into the temple to save my life? Should I disobey God to save my own skin? He says, no, I will not go. I love that here it says it very, very clear. I will not go. Earlier, he was asked to go to the plains of oh no, right? And here, what's he saying? Oh no, I won't go, right? I know, a little cheesy, but I need you to understand. If you ever hear the book of Nehemiah preached on and a pastor doesn't at least, kind of point to the fact that, it's called oh no, then, it's so easy. It's just easy pickings. I had to at least do it once. So, yeah. But he says to the plains of oh no, I'm not going to go. And he says to the temple, oh no, I'm not going to go. I love my wife is really cracking up here right in the front, right? So thanks for that, babe. But it's this setting where he realizes this isn't for me. This is not what I'm going to walk through. I realized that God had not sent him, but that he had prophesied against me. There is a spiritual twisting that's happening here. This man was supposed to be prophesying or giving words from God, but instead he was saying to him, ultimately evil. It was a trick to try and get him to have his authority be undermined. Well, after this happens, Nehemiah has a response. And the response is really something that we're going to look at a lot in the next little bit. And it is this in verse 14. This is his response. Remember Tobiah and Sanballat, my God, because of what they have done. Remember also the prophet Noadiah and how she and the rest of the prophets have been trying to intimidate me. That word at the beginning there of this verse, remember Tobiah and Sanballat, my God. That word remember is actually something that is brought up again and again and again by Nehemiah throughout his time of kind of writing the account. And what's interesting here is that Nehemiah is not putting together a war party to go out and try and fight Sanballat or to fight Tobiah. What does he do? He actually is sitting up and he says, God, you know where we stand. You know how I am before you. And he says, but God, you are the one who needs to remember these two individuals. And you know what they're up to. So God, I trust them to you. I'm going to keep working on the wall that is what you called me to. I'm not going to get distracted. But God, I need you to hold in mind who these people are. And so what the truth I want you to just see here is that Nehemiah is willing to trust in God's memory. That is very hard for us to do at times. We can feel like we've been forgotten by God. We can feel like maybe we're overlooked or that God is busy doing something else. Maybe we get to a point where we don't really know if God exists, if God is there. And so the temptation for us is that place of fear and also that place of doubt. But what we see with Nehemiah is that he grabs hold of this word remember, and he actually holds it out to God. He kind of challenges God with it and says, God, remember these two, these punks, these enemies of mine. God, I hand them over to you. You are the one who can take revenge, and you go forward and take care of them. And also those prophets who are slandering me, intimidating me in your name. This is a big deal. It's important because it shows what a leader who has power and influence can do if they stay focused on the purpose of God and yet they still invite God to participate and for God to do what only God can do. I want to show you just a couple of other verses where Nehemiah actually, this has been his pattern all along. So in Nehemiah chapter 1, verse 8 to 9, it says this. He's praying and he says to God, remember the instruction you gave your servant Moses, saying, if you are unfaithful, I will scatter you among the nations. But if you return to me and obey my commands, then even if your exiled people are at the farthest horizon, I will gather them from there and bring them to a place I have chosen as a dwelling for my name. Nehemiah is reminding God of promises that he made before. And he's saying, God, remember. Then Nehemiah 4, verse 14, says this, after I looked things over, this is a point in time when the people have been intimidated. This is probably about 20 days into the construction. He says to the people, don't be afraid of them. Remember what? Remember what? the Lord, who is great and awesome, and fight for your families and sons and daughters, your wives and your homes. He's continuing to remind the people of what they need to focus on, because sometimes faithfulness is primarily related to focus. It is what we are focused on. And then in the next passage, in 5:19, in this point, he's just navigated the situation of the injustice with the people, the officials, and the poor, and he throws up this prayer. He says, God, remember me with favor for all I have done for these people. I think he's tired. I think he's worn out. I think he's brokenhearted by the difficulty within the community. And I don't know if you've ever had this in your own life where you've really given it a lot to somebody. You've tried to love and invest in maybe a friend or a family member or maybe something at work. And you get to a point where, unfortunately, it seems like someone's going to undermine it or they're going to undercut it. Maybe they're coming back at you with a bunch of like ugliness. And in that spot, you just kind of are exhausted and you just want to throw up your hands and be able to say, you know what, God, can you remember me with favor? Because I know what I did. I know my integrity. I tried. Can you remember that, God? Can you hold on to it? I want to trust in your memory because right now it's really hard for me to continue to see this clearly. And then also in Nehemiah 4, verse 4 to 5, this is kind of a turning point. This is a moment where after being called out and mocked, he prays to God. And this one doesn't specifically say the word remember, but it's important. So this is what Nehemiah prays. Hear us, our God, for we are despised. Turn their insults back on their own heads. Give them over as plunder in a land of captivity. He's mad, and he's letting God know. Do not cover up their guilt or blot out their sins from your sight, for they have thrown insults in the face of the builders. Can a man just build a wall? Can I just build this wall without having people come and cause all kinds of problems? Can I just do that? No. I have to constantly mess with these enemies. And God, they're spitting in our faces, so remember them. God, you know what I'd really love is maybe 2,500 years later, could the names of Sanballat and Tobiah and Geshem, could they be brought up in countries all over the world as people who are real scum? God, could you do that? Could you make it possible that for the next 2,500 years of history, that there would be an account of how big of losers these guys were? God, turn their insults back upon them. You realize the power of prayer when you're facing off against an enemy? So, in verse 14, he says, remember Tobiah and Sanballat, my God, because of what they have done. He puts his anger, his brokenness, his frustration, his enemy into the hands of God. And in doing so, he trusts and he says, I've got work to do. I am working on a big project and I've got to finish it. And this is what is beautiful. And I love the way that Scripture is set up, because immediately after he states this, they chose in the formatting and the layout and the structure of the text that right after he finally just turns these enemies over to God, they put into the text in verse 15, so the wall was completed on the 25th of Elul in 52 days. Woo! There you go. Somebody remembered. Woo! This is a big deal. You don't complete this kind of work in 52 days. But he was not distracted. He would not let intimidation get him down. He didn't go into a place of fear or hiding. He just kept on working. He just kept on pushing forward, encouraging the people, dealing with problems as they came up, making sure that everyone as much as possible could be united in the effort. He did not stop, and he completed something that is very, very profound. 52 days to be able to complete the entire wall, no gap in it, and that it would actually have its gates hung. Now, they have found parts of the Nehemiah wall. In fact, there was an archaeological discovery that happened in about 2007. They were in kind of digging in a certain part of Jerusalem, which they thought was the palace of King David. And as they dug down, because they had to restore this tower, an archaeologist actually found what they believed to be remnants of Nehemiah wall. Do you know why they believe that it's Nehemiah's wall? Is because all the other walls that were created during times of peace or times when Jerusalem was actually in a place of foundation, they were masoned stones. So they were something that was created by like somebody who knew the craft. This wall, which they uncovered, was super rough. There were unmasoned stones jammed in with mud and other stones like put in place. And they could see again and again and again that these like walls, they were not pretty, okay? But they had to get it up. And so Nehemiah just pushed forward and they were using rubble. They were using the ruin of their ancestors' lives to build something that God could use to be able to protect the people. And sometimes in your own life, you might be sitting back and you're like, God, all I got's broken rocks. All I got's a little bit of mud and dust, and I'm trying to jam it together. And God is like, hey, with my grace, that is enough. You think sometimes that maybe we just sing some of these songs on accident, when we come into church. But I want you to know that sometimes I get to a point where I'm like, man, God, are you paying attention to your church? Do you notice us here in Tustin? And last night, our worship leader, Ray, reached out to me and said, hey, what if we changed one of the songs for this morning? I'd like to have a song that's maybe a little bit more upbeat. And I had a certain song in place that I was like, yeah, that's totally fine. Which one do you have in mind? And he said, oh, well, what if we sang Grace is Enough? And I was like, yeah, cool, let's go for that. So I checked the lyrics. And I don't know if you remember singing it just a little while ago, but the song literally goes, God, remember your people. Remember your promise, God. I knew the direction I was going in my message, but as I start reading through these lyrics, I'm literally just struck by the fact that through, the faithfulness of Ray and also through God's orchestration, we're singing our first song where we're literally just calling out to God, remember your people. Remember your promise, oh God. And then what's the chorus? Your grace is enough. Your grace is enough. We will have experiences where enemies or conflict or challenges within our life will get us down. And sometimes the only thing that we're going to be able to pray in that moment is, God, remember us. Don't forget us. Don't look past us. Don't just move on. God, instead, put your attention upon us. The word remember, literally, will you bring together? God, will you assemble, right? Will you actually rebuild your thoughts towards us? And so this is why it's important that we trust in God's memory, because God has never forgotten a single one of Nehemiah's prayers. There's not a single one that he didn't remember. He's never forgotten a single one of your prayers. He does not change. He does not delete. God holds on to it. Your text messages to Jesus don't hit 90 days and then drop off. He holds on to them for always. So you can trust in God's memory. And so the wall was completed on the 25th of Elul, which is probably about August, September time. 52 days is what it took to accomplish. And this is the beauty. I love this verse. Verse 16. When all our enemies heard about this, all the surrounding nations were afraid and lost their self-confidence because they realized that this work had been done with the help of our God. God turned back upon these Sanballat and Tobiah and Geshem, turned back upon them their own insults. Turn it back on them. And guess what happens? When we dare, as followers of Jesus, followers of God, when we dare to remember God and to call out to him to remember us, maybe over the course of 52 days, maybe it's longer than that, eventually we come to a point where our enemies will see and realize that we have a God who is fighting for us, and they will remember our God. And at that point in time, they either can repent and they can come to him, or they have the opportunity to lose their own self-confidence and to find their own insults coming back upon them. That's the reality that we exist within. We are faithful, we are focused, we keep going after what God has put in front of us. We do not get distracted or discouraged. We just keep moving as a community. We deal with our problems within and make sure that we are holy towards God, but that at the end of the day, we remember God, we invite him to remember us, and eventually our enemies will be forced to remember him as well. And then we leave that in God's hands. So all these enemy tactics that we talked about before, I just want you to know that these enemy tactics, they're all common today as well. There's nothing new under the sun. These are things that different people in your own life might bring against you. Sometimes it might be somebody who you really love and you care about, but guess what? The enemy has hired them on, has brought them into their own kind of fold, and now they are working against you. They're a mole, they're a spy. And in those situations, we have to remember that we don't fight against flesh and blood. We do remember the fact that there is an enemy, the devil, who prowls around like a roaring lion looking to devour any one of us. And what I want to make you, not alarm you, but I do want to make you aware of is the fact that while we don't have a Sanballat and a Tobiah right outside of these walls today, there is just as real of an enemy that is seeking to distract you with all kinds of noise and all kinds of invitations out to the plains. There's all kinds of opportunities for you to run and hide, or for you to just entertain yourself to the point where you're not actually engaging. All of these tactics are being used against the church right here and now. They will come at you this week. In the time that we have been called to be a church, I cannot tell you how many, I haven't had an assassination attempt, right? But I cannot tell you how many times that we, in the last 3 years, have come up against significant challenge, and I just have to name it as attack. I have to name it as, you know what, this is just a way that the devil is seeking to undermine us. And sometimes the people that are acting within it, they don't even know, but it hurts, or it discourages, or it makes us question. But this is what I want to be able to put in front of you. This is the hope. This is the good news that we have, is that when Jesus was on the cross, a man right next to him prayed a prayer, and it began with the simple word. He said, "Remember me when you come into your kingdom." And Jesus, right there next to the man on the cross, literally turns to him and says, "Today you will be with me in paradise." The beauty of God's memory is the fact that he doesn't miss anything. And yet, if you sitting back and you're like, "Oh no, I can't talk to God because of my sin," he's like, "Listen, I remember my son. He's in the place of all of your sin." And you say, "Oh no, but I'm so weak." He looks in and he says, No. Don't remember that. Remember me. Remember my strength. Nehemiah accomplished an amazing thing because he remembered God and God remembered him. And that is our hope. That's our strength. That's what we have to be able to hold on to. So the name of this sermon is simply the idea of remember the God that remembers you. Remember him and see what he can do. And eternity is our promise, but here in this day and age, right now, he's with us, and he's going to help us. And so I'm actually going to ask the worship team to do a slight adjustment. We sang that song at the opening of our gathering. I'm actually going to ask them if they would be willing to play it again. So team, if you want to come up, you can actually, I hope that that's okay. Mason, can you make it happen in terms of the lyrics? So we're going to sing "Grace Is Enough" one more time, and you get the chance to be able to reflect on the lyrics